Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right. Welcome to this webinar about real estate in Quebec. We are very, very pleased to have you. And we have a special guest today. Heidi Personneau is our expert on real estate. We've been partner with Heidi since more than 10 years now. Very proud about that. My name is Christine Jeffrey, and I am going to be your moderator today. So in order for this webinar to be interactive and dynamic, we encourage you to interact with us, ask questions through the chat, and we will try to do our best to answer those questions in the most relevant way. So my name is Christine, and I am a coordinator at Anywhere. I'm French originally, and I've been experiencing the challenges of being expatriate, having done that with my own family 22 years ago. So I can all the more understand what you are all going through. Before no more waiting, I'm going to introduce Heidi. Heidi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much, Christine. I have to say that I feel like I have one of the best jobs in the world because our mission is to welcome the expats into their new country, into their new lives. And it's a really very privileged moment to be able to do that. So maybe some of you, we've had the chance to meet last year or the year before when you first came to Quebec. And others, well, we're looking forward to meeting you and helping you find your home. As Christine said, I am the agency director for HP and Associés, which is a real estate agency that specializes in helping out newcomers find their new homes, whether it is purchasing their home or finding a rental, until perhaps they decide down the line to invest into a family home or maybe a rental property. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Christine, for having us.
Thank you so much. And Heidi, I will let you speak and present real estate market.
Sure. So today we're going to touch on a couple of subjects. The first one being an overview of the real estate market. Now, this subject I can go on for hours, but given the time constraint, we'll just give you the big headlines. So it's important to find your way amongst all this abundance of information out there. We'll look at how to buy your first home in Quebec. Maybe this is a project that you're looking into right now, or maybe down the line. Of course, we'll look at the rental process and your rights as a tenant, and we'll go over the public services, what is included in your rent, what is not, and especially true if you have some pets, what to expect. And of course, if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to ask them, and Christine's going to take them at the appropriate time, and we'd love to get some feedback from you. So that'll be wonderful.
Perfect. Thank you. So could you start brushing up about the market at the moment, please?
Sure, absolutely. I would say that my first word of caution would be to really realize that every single province has its own economy and its own real estate realities. And I point this out because Canada is a widely vast country. And if we are looking at British Columbia, or if we're looking at Ontario versus Quebec's market, it's very different. So I would really encourage you to read up about the real estate market that is concerning Quebec itself. The reason being is that our real estate historically has not performed the same way as it has in other provinces. The best example of that is the increase in value typically in Quebec year over year for the last 15 years has been about 5%. So it is a very stable, very resilient market. It is not a market that's speculative, which is very different from what we saw in British Columbia, for example. This being said, we've had 3 years of COVID that have been very particular, very unique, and very out of character for our market. So we have seen homes increase in value anywhere between 30 to 50%. We have seen homes that typically would always sell in a bidding war, which greatly affected the increase in prices, of course, and homes that would sell in a matter of hours from the time that they were put on the market. Now, the government has reined in, they're pulling back, they're trying to pull back on inflation, trying to pull back on the increase of real estate prices across the country. So they've increased the mortgage rates. So we've seen an impact. The market is balancing itself now. Things are slowing down, which means that there's going to be less of an increase in price in the months and hopefully the years to come. And there will be some great opportunities for people to go in there and actually buy the property and not feel so rushed. So this is actually, in the weeks and the months to come, there's going to be some great opportunities out there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Heidi. Could you tell us a little bit more of in which way the real estate broker has an importance?
Sure. So depending on where you're coming from, if you're coming in from the States, you'll probably be familiar with our system that resembles a lot MLS. If you're coming in from Europe, the system is very different. So the whole model of the agencies is built on a collaborative model. And that means that regardless for which agency or broker works, whether it's RE/MAX, Sutton, or an independent local real estate agency, all of the brokerage houses will work together in symbiose. So we have something where the vendors will hire their own broker, which then becomes a listing broker, who will be marketing their property and will be defending their interests. And then a buyer will hire his collaborating broker, who will help them find a property for sale, regardless in which brokerage house it is listed, and will represent their own interests. So up until recently, the law allowed for one broker to represent both parties, which is an obvious conflict of interest. So the law has changed this summer, which is actually a great thing. And each party must have their own brokers defending their own interests. So it's important for newcomers to know that you are very much encouraged to choose your collaborating broker that's going to be able to help you throughout the whole process. On that collaborative front, so there is a website that is absolutely pivotal, and it is called centris.ca. It is the one interface where you will find all of the properties that are for sale or for rent with the real estate agency. Now, this database is verified. All the information has been documented, and it is up to date. So the inventory that you see available on Centris is truly the inventory that's available throughout the whole province with all of the real estate agencies. So if you are looking ahead at eventually a project in a couple of months, Centris is a great place to start.
Perfect. Thank you. And could you explain how the compensation of the broker works?
Sure. That's a great question. And it's actually to the heart of all the questions that newcomers will ask. How do the brokers get paid, and how much will this cost me? So keep in mind that the system is made so that the vendors and the buyers are both protected by their brokers. So what happens is that the vendor will pay a commission to his listing broker, and the listing broker will share that commission with the collaborating broker. So in most cases, all of the brokerage fees will be at the expense of the vendor. And the law is done this way because they want the buyer to have his own collaborating broker and not to forfeit that to save on costs. So it's really a service that is very important, and it is at the vendor's expense in Quebec.
All right. Thank you for those explanations. It's very clear. Now, Heidi, we've heard a lot of things about a new law to be effective on January 1st. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Absolutely. So we have partial information to give about this. So the government of Canada nationwide, so this is across all of the country, has voted on a law that will ban non-Canadians, non-residents from buying residential real estate of less than 3 dwellings. So what does that mean? It means that if I am not a Canadian and I'm not a resident, I won't be able to buy a single family home or a condo or a duplex as of January 1st for the next 2 years. However, the law has said that there's going to be exceptions, and these exceptions will be concerning temporary workers who come to the province to work for a set amount of time. The information that we're lacking at the moment is they have not published the regulations that go along with the law. So we're all kind of just waiting to see what they're going to be publishing. The law is on effect in January 1st, so we're hoping that we should be getting it any day now. But so far, it is going in the sense that there will be some exceptions for our clients, newcomers who are coming. So we'll have to keep you up. We'll have to keep you informed. As soon as we know, we will let you know.
All right. Thank you for your expert eye on that. Now, could you explain a little bit more in detail how the purchase of a residential property works?
Absolutely. So I think first of all, the thing that usually surprises our newcomers is how quickly and simple the process is. Buying a property from the moment that you start your first approche takes about 30 days, and then you can be an owner of that property. Now, first step would be to go see your banker and obtain a pre-approval certificate. This is no commitment on the side of the buyer. It is simply the bank that attests that they are willing to lend you a certain amount of money based on your financial situation. So once you have that pre-approval certificate, it's now time to start looking for a property. And you could do that with your broker via Centris. There's a ton of information that the broker can provide you concerning that neighborhood, that street, that construction, the builder, see how much the neighbors are selling for to really give you some key information on that purchase. Once you've narrowed down your list, then hopefully we're able to do in-person visits. I mentioned that because in the last 3 years, we've been doing a lot of virtual visit purchases with our clients. Technology is such that they almost feel like they're seeing the home. Of course, we prefer when they're able to come in person. So now that we're able to do that, that's fantastic. Once we find a home that suits you, we will be presenting a promise to purchase. Now, keep in mind that negotiations happen very quickly. Usually, we will give the vendor about 12 to 24 hours to make up their mind. If they decide to make us a counter offer, that will be another 12 hours. But typically, within a day or two, we will either have an accepted offer or a refused offer. This process doesn't drag on for days or weeks. Very expedient. So in this promise to purchase, we will be offering a purchase price. We will be offering a date of notary, a date of occupation. We'll be looking at the inclusions that we would like to have in the sale. So perhaps there's some appliances, some furniture, whatever that may be. We'll present an offer to the vendor. And then he will have the choice to either make us a counter offer, accept, or refuse. We will also be including in the promise to purchase a couple of conditions, which is very reassuring actually for the buyer. So one of those conditions will be that the buyer will be able to secure a final approval from the bank. Now, this is great from a buyer's standpoint because the bank will be sending an evaluator to determine if the price that you're offering to pay truly represents the market value, which is very reassuring because you have a third party who's usually very conservative comes and validate that the price that you were paying is in fact the correct one. So the bank will have about 12 days. We'll need about 12 days to provide you with the final approval. Another condition will be the inspection of the property. So the buyers will hire a accredited inspector who will come and evaluate all of the components of the home. So they'll be looking at the foundation, at the roof, the plumbing, the electricity, all of the components of the house, and will then provide you with a report, about 40 pages or so. Now, if this inspection reveals anything of significance that would have made you double think about buying this property, we will have 3 choices. Either we will renegotiate the price with the vendors, Either we will consider the promise to purchase null and void, and there will be no penalties for the buyers, or you could also accept the condition of the home and continue with the sale at the same conditions. So really, there's a decision to be taken at that time when we do the inspection. Another condition, if we're buying a co-ownership, so a condo, would be to be able to review the rules and regulations of the association, make sure that the management is properly done, that there's sufficient money in the fund of the syndicate, and that too will take about 10 days. So really, from the moment that we've made the promise to purchase to the moment that we've fulfilled all of the conditions, there's about 12 to 15 days lapse that has gone by.
I have a question, Heidi. Is the inspection mandatory?
Oh, that's a great question. So it is not mandatory. So we'll see it once in a while that a buyer will forfeit their right to an inspection. Sometimes because they're with competing offers and they're trying to make their offer more attractive. It is definitely not something that we recommend. The inspection is a very important part of the process. A purchase of a home is a significant amount for most people, and it's important to know exactly what we're buying. And also, should there ever be any problems with the home, we have to be able to show that we were a diligent buyer who took precautions to make sure that they were making an appropriate purchase. So the inspection is really important. Not mandatory, but definitely recommended.
All right, thank you for answering that question. Now, how does the whole transaction finish?
Sure. So once all the conditions are fulfilled, the file is then transferred over to the notary, which will require approximately 2 to 3 weeks to be able to do their due diligence, to call upon the funds and prepare the act of sale. And once that's done, you go to the notary and you have become the new owner of your home in Quebec. So the process could take as little as 1 month. Typically, we're looking at about 45 days or so.
All right. Well, do you have any question, the viewers, people who are watching us, so far about the purchase of a housing? You can ask them later if you want. We are going to continue with a little bit of more details about the housing. Could you give us examples?
Sure. So we were looking at both rentals and purchases. So typically your single family home on the island of Montreal will be going at about 700,000. Off the island of Montreal will be going at about 564,000. In terms of rental, as we're transitioning to the rental process now, the prices that we used to have 4 years ago have nothing to do with the prices that are on the market today. So there is a huge pressure because of lack of inventory on a raise of rental prices. So a 2-bedroom apartment nowadays will run you anywhere between $1,000 to $5,000 on the island, depending, of course, of the neighborhood. So if we're looking at a high-end, fully furnished water view, of course, we're looking more in the range of $5,000. If we are looking at an apartment, 2 bedrooms, that's a little bit more on the outskirts of downtown, so we'll have access to a subway or to a bus line, we're looking at the $1,000 to $1,300 range, a little bit further from downtown. So everything is a question of location, of course. Just keep in mind that if you had some friends or relatives who were staying in Montreal and landed here about 5-6 years ago, their rent that they're paying now is probably not reflective of the actual market value these days.
And I guess it also depends on if it is furnished or not.
Of course, of course. So most apartments are semi-furnished, and that means that they will have the appliances included. You could have a fully furnished, but in that case, those are usually much more expensive and much more of a short-term solution. So perhaps our expats will arrive, they'll have a fully furnished to start off while they're looking for their long-term rental.
All right. We have a question that goes back to the purchase. Does the Quebec law have any protection in case of a hidden default?
A hidden defect, sure, absolutely. So there is within the law, whatever is known by the purchaser at the time of the purchase is not considered a hidden default or anything that could have been seen by a purchaser. Hence the importance of the inspection, because the inspector becomes your eyes and he is mandated to see everything that could be seen. Now, something that could not be seen by the purchaser at the time and that has not been declared by the vendor, the law protects. So you would have recourses against the vendor in that situation. Hence the importance of doing your inspection.
All right. Well, thanks for answering that question. Now, could you give us a little more details about the vocabulary about housing?
Oh, sure. So it's very different from the ones of our expats who come in from France and Europe. So the base that we consider is the living room will count as one, the bedroom will count as one, the kitchen will count as one, and then the bathroom, regardless of the amount of bathrooms that there are, will always count as a half. So your base will be a 3.5, which means one bedroom. Now, if you're adding an extra bedroom, you're looking at a 4.5, which means that there are 2 bedrooms in there. So it's important to get familiarized because as you're looking through ads, you'll often see that 5.5, which is 3 bedroom, for rent, 2.5, 3.5. Anyways, so your base is 3.5, and then we add on extra bedrooms to that. When we talk about a duplex, we do not mean an apartment that has 2 floors. What it means is that it's a building that has within itself 2 separate apartments, regardless of the number of floors in those apartments. So then we'll understand that a triplex is a building that has 3 apartments inside. Bungalow will be a 1-floor house. Cottage is a 2-floor house. And just for the little story of shoebox, it's very traditional and very typical Montreal home. It is a small house that is stuck between 2 bigger buildings and that has a flat roof. Now, they've become very, very popular in recent years. They used to be actually for the workers of the factories that could only afford a very small house, but over time they've become very popular and very expensive.
Very interesting. Thank you about that. Now, you mentioned about resources, how to find those housing. You mentioned the census system. Are there other resources?
Sure. So there are many places where one can find ads for rentals. So as we can see, there's Marketplace, Kijiji, all of these lists where you could find rentals. I would say a word of caution because we have seen an uprise in a lot of fraud lately. So what people do is that they will take an ad from a real estate agency and they will copy it, put it on these platforms and pretend to be the owner. And so our expats who are from abroad, they will, contact the person who's pretending to be the owner. They might even do virtual visits. I mean, they get along fantastic. It's wonderful. And of course, to secure the apartment, you need to wire the first month's rent. And so we've seen it more and more in the last years that people will actually show up and only to realize they do not have a rental, they've lost their money, and the recourses are very difficult. One way to avoid that, of course, is to go through a real estate agency because they're regulated, they're insured. You've got a trusted intermediate there, a relocation company. Worst case, you could always, if you have friends and family, have them look into it, but they need to know how to look into it as well. So just a word of caution. It's a great exercise to maybe browse through all these websites to see the types of apartments and the prices, but just always have that in the corner of your mind that there's a lot of fraud that's happening lately.
All right. So hence the importance of being accompanied by an expert. Now, how does the whole rental process work? What are the steps?
Sure. So normally, if an owner would be renting to a local person who's been here all their lives for a number of years, they will ask them for a credit check. Now, a credit check is a system that we use daily. It's something that's part of our lives. it's the banking systems or any kind of company that you have a contract with, whether it's be a cell phone, whether it be for a rental of a car, anything financial. They will report back to a company who will then produce a credit check on you. And depending on your score, you'll have access to loans or you'll have access to better rates. And also an owner can check whether or not you're financially solvable and if you respect your contracts. Now, when we've just arrived in Canada, we don't have a credit history yet. So we need to compensate for the lack of credit history. So preparing that file ahead of time is very important. So the things that you would need to prepare would be if you have a letter of your employer, if you have a work contract, a copy of your work visa, if you have a letter of recommendation from your previous owners, from where you're coming from, that's great. We will also be asking our families or the couple or the person that's coming to prepare a letter of presentation saying who they are, what they've done, why they're coming to Canada, so that the owner has a sense of who he's dealing with. It also helps a lot if you have a relocation company or a real estate broker who comes and helps give credibility to your file. So we'll get all of that ready and packaged. We'll start visiting some properties. So there's virtual visits, there's in-person visits. And as soon as you find something that you like, then we'll be presenting an offer. And once that offer is accepted, then we're able to sign a lease. Christine, if I may, I'll just touch up on the fact that there really is a lack of inventory for rental properties, affordable rental properties. So when we're looking at options, sometimes your broker or your relocation company or even yourself doing your own researches will find very little options. So my best recommendation is as soon as you find something that is acceptable to you, don't hesitate too long to secure the apartment because most likely it will be rented within the day or two. So it's unfortunate, but there's not a lot of options out there. So as soon as you find something, I would say that moving quickly is very important.
All right, I understand. Now, could you tell us a little more about the security deposit amount? Because we hear a lot of legends about that.
Absolutely. So the law says that an owner cannot ask for a security deposit. However, in real life, almost everybody does. So we should get ready that we'll have to pay for a security deposit, which is the equivalent of 1 month's rental. And they will ask for the first month to be paid upfront at the time of signing the lease. So we should prepare ourselves to be giving 2 months rent at the time of signing the lease.
All right. So I guess it's a question of negotiation as well, which is better if you're a company.
For sure. We've seen owners who have asked for 6 months, but that's abusive. Typically, the norm is about 2 months.
All right. Now, what is the jurisdiction that handles all housing in terms of rental?
Sure. So it used to be called la Régie du Logement. It's now called the Administrative Housing Tribunal. And really, they encadrer, excuse me, I've got the word in French. They legislate everything that has to do with leasing in the province. So there's one typical standard lease that everybody needs to use. There is no set duration for the lease, meaning you could sign a lease for 6 months, but typically the leases run for 12 months and they are automatically renewed unless one of the two parties decides to either not renew or to increase the rent. The relationship between the tenant and the landlord is very balanced. So both really have good recourses should the other party not respect their obligations. Best example of that is to say, if a tenant were to not pay their rent, within 3 months, they could be evicted. So in some countries, I know this could drag on for years. It's not the case in Quebec. So very important to respect your obligations, to pay your rent on time, in full, The same way the landlord has the obligation to maintain the apartment in good working condition. So if anything breaks down, he needs to repair that. There's a automatic renewal of the lease that happens, which means that if the owner doesn't send you any notice and you want to stay in the apartment, it will just renew itself automatically. If you do not want the lease to renew itself at the end of the lease, you need to let your landlord know 3 months in advance. And there are certain forms that you can fill out. Very simple, but you need to respect that deadline. The same way, if they want to increase the rent after the first year, they'll have to let you know 3 months in advance. And the law only allows for a small percentage of increase every year. So I think last year it was 2%. This year we'll see how much they come up with. So they cannot just double the lease. It's regulated.
Yes. And Heidi, tell me, does a lease typically last 1 year, 2 years? How does it work?
So typically you could sign a lease for 2-3 years if you wanted to, but typically it'll be 12 months. So 1 year with that automatic renewal afterwards.
All right. Now, before going forward, we have a question from one of our participants. How much does the notary work cost, and who will have to pay that?
Very good. So we're going back to the purchase of the property now. So in general, just so that we know, purchase costs in Quebec are relatively very low. So it's anywhere between 2 to 3% of the purchase of the house. Within those 2-3%, we have the inspector. Remember when we said that you need to have the property inspected? That will run you about $800. And then the notary is a set fee. So it's not in accordance to the purchase price. It's a set fee, and they can range anywhere between $2,500 to $3,000, depending on the notary. And then afterwards, you have one-time tax that is billed by the municipality, which is ironically called the welcome tax. And that will be typically 1 to 1.5% of the purchase price of the home. So to make that very concrete, if we're looking at purchasing a home of $500,000, our cost will be about $10,000, all inclusive of everything we just mentioned.
All right, thank you. I hope this answers your question. Now, let's talk about pets. Believe it or not, almost 30% of our newcomers arrive with animals, mostly cats, dogs. You have to know that not all apartments are suited for animals, and not all owners accept animals. So it makes the task of finding housing a little more difficult. It means more negotiation. And if you look at the map, we have listed the apartments in a certain area that accept animals, and the same with people who don't accept animals. You can see a difference. So if you are intending to adopt an animal, we recommend that you wait a little bit before. All right. Now, to finish about the rental process, you have to know and include, while calculating your budget, you have to anticipate the electricity. We indicated the prices on this slide. So between $90 and $130 a month. The good news is that water is free in Canada, which is a nice resource. It's not the case in all countries in the world. Internet, it's another story. It's rather expensive, between $70 and $100 a month. But you have to know that it's better to market, to compare prices. We can definitely assist you with that, to understand the better option depending on your needs. And it's also important to know that you can negotiate again and every year, every 2 years, to smaller that amount. Now, the cell phone is also quite expensive in Quebec. So you could expect between $65 and $100 per month. Depending on the option, you can find maybe a little less, but it depends on your needs and what you want to be covered for. And cable, so TV, between $30 and $80 a month. And don't forget the home insurance, which is rather mandatory. It's not expensive at all, and we can definitely guide you with our partners to find the most suitable one for you. It's important to be insured. I believe, Heidi, tell me if I'm wrong, it's up to $2 million of damages. For example, if you put fire on your neighbor, if you create physical damages on anyone, because of something happening in your apartment, you'd better be protected.
Absolutely. Civil responsibility is $2 million. Some co-ownerships demand $5 million, but standard is $2 million.
All right. Thank you, Heidi. Now, we have an interesting question, which goes back to the purchasing process. What type of housing will have the most probability of have best resale value?
Oh, I love these questions.
House, rental. So that's an interesting question about speculation and
right. So I love these questions. It really depends on your budget that you're able to invest, quite frankly. So if we have a budget that allows us to go buy a duplex or a triplex, those are amazing because the rental prices are really going high and the resale value of those properties is great. We're able to optimize it over a certain number of years. However, you need to be able to have that kind of funds available to make that investment. If we're looking at an entry-level investment, it's always interesting to find a single-family home outside of the greater region of Montreal. Makes it more affordable. If we want to stay inside Montreal, we would recommend buying a small condo close to the many universities on the island, which will always be rented at a great price and usually have a great resale value because there's so much in demand. So depending on your budget, we'll have to see which one is the best for you, but definitely some opportunities out there.
All right. Well, thank you, Han Jong. I hope I don't I pronounce your name right. Thanks, Heidi, for answering that. Now we have Offset 2 is requiring that we make a French version. That's already done. We have made a previous webinar 2 weeks ago. Offset 2, you can find the French version on our YouTube channel. So, we will be glad also to answer any question you might have. All right. So that's about it about the purchase rental process. We are going to take all of your questions if you have any. So please write us, In the meantime, on that slide, we put our information, all the contacts, and we'll be glad to accompany you for any needs. So for any relocation needs, our company Anywhere is able to assist you finding the right neighborhood for the housing, the schooling, administrative procedures. We are here for everything. And on her end, Heidi will be able to help you out with any real estate need. Right, Heidi?
Exactly. So like I was saying, it's a privilege to be able to be there for you when you're finding your first home. Typically, our clients will choose to, when they arrive, to have a rental and to really get their bearings, discover what the areas are about, the neighborhoods. They've got children, of course, the schools, and usually they will rent for a year. And as soon as possible, and as soon as they're able to go and secure that mortgage, we'll be looking at making that investment for their first home. And it's quite often that we'll see people afterwards also making investments. So, Hai Jung, your question was great because there's lots of opportunities in the market.
Good. Thank you so much. So according to you, Heidi, Montreal, Quebec in general remains a very good areas for investing.
It is. We're coming out of this very intense period, but keep in mind that Quebec has had this long-standing problem of a lack of inventory, which means that there is always that higher demand, either for rentals or for family homes. and there's just not enough inventory. And that means that it is a true market with a demand. It is not a speculative market. And so far, there has not been any massive influx of inventory. So this will carry on for a number of years. So there will always be that demand. We're just hoping that now the market will be more balanced. It's been very intense for our buyers for the last 3 years, and we're looking forward to a little bit more of a balanced market.
All right. Maybe another question would be, how long would it take for a newcomer to build his credit history, and to be able to pay the mortgage?
Right. So every banks will defer one to the next, but I have to say that there's one bank in particular that has a whole team that is only devoted to newcomers, chez Desjardins. It's Desjardins, the bank, and they have a lot of flexibility, and they really understand what it is to be a newcomer and to arrive in the country. So they give a chance to the newcomers to come. So after just a couple of months, actually, of them having a regular employment and then having a couple of transactions on their credit history. So here, let's think about a cell phone. Let's think about the electricity. Let's think about internet, anything really that helps to build that credit history. After 4, 5, 6 months, they're able to qualify for a mortgage that allows them to put maybe only 10% down as a cash down. So there's definitely much more opportunities than we think. Always keep in mind that every single, the governments, whether it's federal or provincial, they're really encouraging people to be able to buy their homes. And so they have some great programs that are out there. Really well worth having a conversation with that banker and seeing, maybe mapping out the next year and seeing what are your possibilities when they come up so that you're ready when you do find something that suits you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. I don't know if any of you has any other question. Otherwise, we're just going to finish the webinar. Thank you very, very much, Heidi, for having been our special guest today. And thank you to all of the participants to this webinar. You can contact us for any further question if you need to be accompanied. I see one of the participants thanks us for answering the questions and would like to find a job in Quebec. So yeah, I wish that for you. And so please don't hesitate to contact us for any other question.
Thank you very much.